Hello everyone, welcome back to the new news and thank you for joining us on our 100th stream thus far since we started reporting. My name is Paul and I hope that everyone is having a fantastic evening. I hope that everyone is having a wonderful time. Congratulations, it is also Wednesday, meaning you have made it halfway through the work week, so pat yourself on the back. It's a wonderful night tonight. It has been a little bit rainy and a little bit warm here, as I know large majority of the United States is in a heat wave right now, as am I. And there's been a ton of news that's happened all across the world, especially inside of the country of Ukraine, of course, which is what many of you here are for. But we also have a ton of other stuff happening internationally, too. A lot of big developments when it comes to Taiwan, a lot of stuff in the Indo-Pacific, stuff in the Middle East, and we have some developments in the United States and Africa as well. And so I hope that you guys will continue to join us. Thank you so much for the support you guys have given us over the last 100 streams. It's been amazing to see you guys here. It's been amazing for that we've built this kind of an awesome community. And what makes this community so awesome is the fact that we are able to be the news that gives back. We give back directly to the news stories we talk about here on the channel. And if you go and you check out in the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different links down there for different organizations, humanitarian organizations, or organizations supporting war efforts ongoing in Ukraine. Things like UNICEF are down there. Come Back Alive, which with your donations, along with donations of many others, actually just purchased a Bayraktar TB2 for Ukraine and for the armed forces of Ukraine, which is awesome, as well as a ton of different pieces of body armor for Ukrainian forces and territorial defense forces, which is awesome and highly needed. It's literally going to save people's lives. And so we are giving back to all sorts of things, not just the war, of course, but things like natural disasters, things like the horrific climate change, things that are affected by collateral hunger as a result of the ongoing crises throughout the world. On this channel, we're never pushing super chats. We're never going to do super chats on this channel. I hate the idea of profiteering off of people's suffering. So we're never doing super chats on this channel. We're never pushing any kind of merchandising for the exact same reason. 100% of everything we do is going to charity. So if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's fine. Give us a like and subscribe. Let your friends know about us. It helps the channel out a ton. It helps everyone else out here a ton. And ultimately, the whole point of that is to bring as many people onto this as possible. Because if we can if the more people that are here, the more of an impact we will have with these charities and events. And hopefully, we'll be able to actually put charities directly onto this stream and actually raise money through the stream itself, which would be an awesome endeavor. In which case, we will be doing that on every single one of our streams. So thank you so much for the support you've given us as a channel, and thank you so much for the support that you've given those organizations down below. Now, I do have a little bit of a comment. I kind of went back through and thought about some of the stuff that was said yesterday during yesterday's stream, and I may have gotten a little too political when it comes to a channel that's supposed to be apolitical, relatively unbiased, or at least clearly stated having a bias, and we clearly state that we have a bias for Ukraine. And I went a little bit overboard, especially when it comes to Russia and in regards to China. And so I understand as a human being that I have faults and emotions when it comes to that kind of stuff, just like everybody else. And while I am the host of this channel, I do not see myself as being the one that determines that kind of a path. So it is my personal opinions, but those are also, very emotionally charged after watching some of the stuff we talked about in our stream yesterday, and I hope that you can understand. But we do try to be apolitical. We do try to be unbiased here on this channel, or at least clearly state a bias, as we have for Ukraine. We have stated very clearly that we have a bias for Ukraine because we can't morally support any kind of endeavor that the Russian Federation is currently ongoing with. And so I hope that you guys would continue working through us with that. We're still trying to perfect how we're doing things, even 100 streams in. So hopefully we can only go up and up from there. But thank you guys so much for continuing to support us despite, some of the flaws here. And hopefully you continue to join us. And with that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to dive right into the news. And there is a ton of it. We, of course, start off with our special report here in Ukraine. And we start off here in Kyiv, where we have a couple of different things. First of all, the war affects many types of people, but most egregiously so children. And this is the war's effects on these children. As of August the 3rd, as of August the 3rd, due to Russian military aggression in Ukraine, 693 Ukrainian children were injured and 358 were killed. 204 Ukrainian children are reported missing. Moreover, Russian occupiers forcibly deported about 5,911 Ukrainian children. And that's coming from Oksana Filipishina, who is the representative of the Ukrainian Parliament Commission for Human Rights on the Observance of Children's Rights. So, quite a big thing to take in there. One of the reasons why there is a push to declare what Russia is doing as genocide is because there are multiple factors that roll into that when it comes to crimes against humanity. A war crime is an independent event. It happens in every war, no matter what side you're talking about. Troops in Ukraine have certainly committed war crimes throughout this endeavor. It has happened. I guarantee you it has happened. But the caveat to that is what the Russians are doing, it goes a step above that to where you can start getting into crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. The reason we can do that is because of forced deportations. We're talking about the complete destruction of things such as cultural landmarks, religious landmarks, the designation of roads and villages and stuff like that. The complete change in education for the Russians, all the banning of Ukrainian language in some areas. That is more akin to crimes against humanity, and we can go a step further than that when you're talking about the scorched earth policy that's being conducted, the widespread amount of war crimes and the level of them. When you're talking about places like Mariupol, Severodonetsk, Lysychansk being completely destroyed, you're talking about this is something that was planned. This is premeditated. This is purposeful. This is not a platoon or a company or a individual soldier or officer or group of individuals on the front lines who are bad eggs. This is too widespread to be considered that. And that's where the argument for the International Criminal Court is there regarding ethnic cleansing, genocide, and crimes against humanity. And it's a very strong argument at this point, especially when you talk about 5,911 Ukrainian children being forcefully deported. Even inside of Russia, we have, of course, access to some of their databases regarding their laws. We know that they have passed laws regarding taking Ukrainian orphans and actually getting them adopted inside of Russia, which Russia refuses to actually adopt out back to any Ukrainian families. We know that based off of laws that they had passed prior to even invading in Ukraine. But there is a little bit of good news coming out of Kyiv, and that's because President Zelensky has asked the Prime Minister of Ukraine to consider the legalization of same-sex marriage inside of the country. The wheels keep turning when it comes to a democracy, regardless of what is happening inside of your country. And domestic policy is no different. The thing is that for Ukraine, this is actually a big hurdle for them. Not because it's politically charged on one side or the other, but because Ukraine still recognizes that marriage is, according to the Constitution of Ukraine, is based on the free consent of a man and a woman. And the Constitution, and that the Constitution cannot be changed during wartime. So they're looking into this, but the Constitution is not allowed to be changed during wartime specifically for that. He responded to a petition made on his website where 30,000 people supported the endeavor, and Zelensky noted that he would like to do this. So it's a very important step, but it also is a step towards joining the European Union, which recognizes same-sex marriage as well. So that is once again, that's EU integration, but it's also domestic affairs in there, which is a little bit different than what we normally are getting when it comes out of the Verkhovna, I believe is what it is, the Ukrainian parliament. As you jump over here into Kharkiv and Chuihiv have received a massive amount of shelling over the last about 48 hours. Quote, rocket attacks on the city of Chuihiv in the Kharkiv region on August the 3rd. One person was killed and 2 citizens were injured. Local residential buildings were damaged. Russian aggressors used cluster shells banned by international conventions. Coming from Sergei Bolvinov, the head of the investigative department and the main director of the National Police in the Kharkiv region. There is some notes and some caveats to those notes regarding the use of cluster munitions. You have the United States, Ukraine, and Russia. None of them are signatories to the Ottawa Convention, which bans the use of landmines and cluster munitions. So, in warfare, all three countries, the United States included, while the United States follows the Ottawa Treaty, it is not a signatory of it, therefore it's not required to. It just does so because it's morally the right thing to do, but the United States likes to have the option open. Cluster munitions are very horrendous, but they also have their uses in combat. It's a tool just like everything else. Russia and Ukraine, very similarly, neither of them are signatories, and we know that neither country actually follows that. Follows the Ottawa Convention. Ukraine, we have yet to be able to identify an instance where they have indeed used cluster munitions. There have been reports of usage of cluster munitions, but we do know that Russia uses them rather extensively. We've seen it across this front before, and we've even seen this prior to this, back in 2016 during the bombing of Aleppo in Syria. The Aleppo campaign, which lasted several months. So we do know that the Russians will use this, and they will use these in densely populated areas. The reason why we can consider this a war crime is because of the first protocol of the Geneva Convention, specifically Articles 49 and Article 51, which so happens that the Russians actually pointed out for us yesterday when they were talking about this very same thing, but vice versa, where they are blaming Ukraine on using cluster munitions. And the reason for this is because cluster munitions used in a densely populated area, a densely populated concentration of civilians, does not mitigate the possibility of civilian casualties or collateral damage, which is required under Protocol 1 and your pre-planning, preparation, and usage of a means of war inside of civilian populated areas. Civilians being around does not mean that you cannot strike a target. You're required to mitigate losses, but even the Geneva Convention understands that collateral loss of life and destruction of infrastructure is going to happen in a war. The difference is just how much, and that's what we're seeing here is a total disregard or care regarding the Geneva Conventions or the Protocol 1, and we don't have to look any further than, once again, Severodonetsk, Rubizny, Lysychansk, Bolokove, which we saw yesterday, Popasna, really anywhere. Take your pick, anywhere here on the front lines. It's a total disregard. Of course, we get our daily update coming out of Donetsk on the Ukrainian side. Quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the Donetsk region on August the 2nd. 4 people were killed and 7 citizens were injured. And that's coming from Pavel Korolenko, who's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. We basically get an update every single day, 24 hours of delay there for them to conduct, search and rescue, body recovery, that kind of stuff, and to sift through rubble and see what has been destroyed. But about 24 hours of delay with a lot of official statements. At the very least, 12 to 24 hours, sometimes more if it's a bigger event. And what we get is basically an update every single day of what has happened the day prior from the Donetsk region. Pavel Korolenko has been very good about keeping a daily update regarding casualties amongst civilians and destruction on these cities. The Donetsk region is seeing a significant uptick in combat. We're seeing a massive amount of movement in the Popasna area, which was a Popasna pocket earlier on in the Donbass offensive. And now we're seeing them try to push towards Soledar, Bakhmut, and Toretsk, which means that they're trying to conduct what appears to be a pincer movement. We don't know if that full offensive is underway, but we are seeing a significant increase. 10 settlements as of yesterday have been shelled over the 5-day break while we were off, and we continue to see that shelling into today. However, the information out of that area is relatively limited due to the large-scale military actions currently ongoing. Over here in Marinka, which is on the opposite side of this front lines, we're seeing a Russian tank farm was destroyed, reportedly. Quote, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed a Russian tank farm in the city of Makivka in the Donetsk region on August the 3rd, and that's coming from the Department of Strategic Communications of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. A tank farm, what is this? Well, it's just a bunch of tanks in a field. They're just staged. It's a staged unit of tanks. Probably a BTG. This probably was staged here in kind of a ready position, and they were able to effectively, target them and destroy a large column of vehicles. We do not know the actual casualty losses there, but many times we're not going to talk about military casualties here on this channel. There is either deflation or inflation of casualty numbers regarding on what side you're talking to. Some of that is purposeful, some of that is not. If you go back to battlefield commander reports from the first Gulf War, you will see that the United States report, according to the battlefield commanders, killed the entire Iraqi army 7 times over. So it's not all purposeful. Losses are certainly inflated, though. If you look at Kiev independent numbers, which they come out every single day, they are actually getting that from the Department of Defense, or the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, I should say, rather. And those are somewhere, I believe they're saying 41,000 estimated killed at this point for the Russian forces. If that was true, the war would be over by now, because they would have killed essentially 70% of the forces dedicated to this war. And if you and that's just dead. If you account for the wounded, which are usually 2 to 3 times the amount of actual killed in combat, you're talking about wiping out the entire active duty military of the Russian Federation, which is not going to happen. The war would be over by now. So we know that that's not true. So that is very obviously inflated to a degree. So this is coming from JL. There's been some info here and there that due to Russia knows it's impossible to capture Kharkiv, they want to encircle it. Going back up here to Kharkiv. So here's the thing. When it comes to Kharkiv, at this point in the war, Russia really doesn't have the forces to do it. Russia really didn't have the forces to begin with to really go into this endeavor. You usually want a 2 or 3 to 1 advantage as an invading force, because you're going to take higher casualty rates. War, believe it or not, is a science. There's actually a casualty planning graphs that you can go off of. That is really fantastic. That they have come out. It's been a science since the 1700s as to casualty rates, and it's only been improved over time. The Loves graph, I think, is what it is. The UK uses is an example of that, and the defending armies can take significant losses, but they're going to take for every 3 losses, the Russians may take 5, for instance. The invading army is going to have a more difficult time overall. And the Russians, from the get-go, had about a 1-to-1 advantage when it came to battlefield capability. That gap is quickly increasing, and it's increasing into Ukraine's favor as Western equipment and artillery really puts their firepower parity, meaning how much artillery, how much firepower, how much accuracy and capability their military has, as opposed to the Russian Federation with precision strikes and once again accuracy, really means that they aren't going to be able to do anything. Once again, William Young here chimes in. He says, in order to take or encircle Kharkiv, they need to do a mass mobilization. That's essentially true. Russia isn't willing to admit that this is a war. To even partially mobilize or to fully mobilize, Russia would have to declare an actual war, which they are 100%. That rhetoric is refusing to do so. That was what was expected at the May 9th Victory Day parade. It didn't happen. And that was widely speculated by everybody that was going to happen. Even the best in the intelligence communities here in the Western countries thought it was going to happen. And it very may well could have been. And then, he got there and read the room kind of happens. And maybe he cut it out. Who knows? But Kharkiv at this point in the war, after the counteroffensive took place here very early on in the Donbass campaign, they were pushed back. The Russian forces hold a couple of different pockets. There's one up here in the north. And there's also, once you get down here towards Izium, they hold this section as well. However, their artillery is no longer within range of Kharkiv, or conventional artillery, I should say. They are no longer able to reach it with Grad systems or Mistas or any of that, 2S1s, 2S3s. but they are able to use Iskander-M missile systems as well as converted S-300 anti-air batteries that now can do surface attacks. They are firing those from Belgorod, which is across the border inside of Russia. The Russians really don't have the manpower capability or the concentration of forces within this region. What they're really doing is they're holding the line here, preventing Ukrainian forces from pushing further south, and really pushing any pressure on their Izium pocket here, so they can continue to put pressure on Slavyansk and the major hub of Kramatorsk for the Russian forces, which is really where it seems to be they're amassing their forces alongside with Bakhmut. Really, Kharkiv at this point has no tactical or strategic capability. It's not really worth it anymore, and that is just getting to Kharkiv. Taking Kharkiv would be an absolute miserable mess of some very terrible. It's the second largest city in Ukraine, so you're talking about some very, very terrible urban fighting. JP Saranovka says, I can't take the suspense of the Kherson situation. Media Black has info trickling in. Yes, and we'll actually get to some of what's happening in Kherson. We know some stuff that's happening in Kherson, but we'll get into a little bit here towards the end of the Ukraine segment. So once we get through the rest of the Donbass, we'll be able to talk on that too, because we do have some stuff out of the Kherson Oblast. As we jump over here, this is in the Zaporizhzhia region, and the flow of men and material really continues here in Ukraine. The Russian forces are still in a majority stance in a tactical pause. They've taken some very strategic hits to crossing points and command centers throughout Ukraine. Their ammunition depots have been relatively destroyed, and that means that they are no longer able to sustain such a heavy rate of artillery fire. While still heavy, it's not nearly what it was several weeks ago when the HIMARS first showed up. But the Russians are still bringing in a ton of men and equipment. They're taking really unsustainable losses at the front lines, and they're having to try and replace it. When there are some pros and cons to this, most Russian vehicles are relatively easy to pilot. They're purposely built that way. It doesn't take a lot of training, but it still takes some training. But we see their equipment is progressively getting older, and it's and more obsolete when it comes to what they're fielding. And we're seeing that they're trying to bring in massive amounts of quantities of it, meaning that we know that they're taking pretty heavy losses and that they're having to try and make up for those losses in numbers. But they're suffering from a manpower shortage. You need crews. The crew members were killed when the vehicles were destroyed. You have to recrew these new vehicles. Replacing a hunk of metal in the that can drive is only as good as having someone to drive it. And a gunner, having a big gun on top of a tank is only as good as you having a gunner. So the manpower shortage is not going to help them. But we can see here some MTLBs, which are being flatbedded to the front lines here. Pretty extensive amount of equipment that we see getting transported here as BTGs are moving up and they're reconcentrating their forces during this relatively tactical pause here on the front lines. You can see those invasion markings very clear. These are MTLBs. Mini turret long body is the easy way to remember it. These are a much older APC variant. It's a tracked APC that they use pretty extensively throughout the Russian Federation. It's a Soviet era vehicle, but not very heavily armored. Not very heavily armored, and it's relatively obsolete. That actually brings us down, and we can hit on that point once again here at the Crimean Bridge. And so the Russian forces, we saw a large amount of SPGs as well as APCs being transported via flatbed rail car out across the Crimean Bridge, and they are headed into the southern part of or they're headed into Crimea, and therefore they will be headed up into the Zaporizhzhia Oblast and as well as the Kherson Oblast. And we can see some of this here. A lot of these are Mista S's. And go ahead and take a look.
Смотри, часа взял и запись вот эти вот.
So I just learned that I butchered Saranikova. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to butcher your name a second time. Yeah, Saranikov. Sorry. I can't pronounce very well. I barely speak English. And I'm also trying to learn another language. It's just pretty impressive considering I can't speak the one I was born into. But yeah, I'm sorry if I mispronouncing. I'm not very good at pronunciation whatsoever. I spent a year in the Middle East in total, and I still don't speak Arabic or Kurdish very well. So I'm sorry for butchering if I butcher your guys' names. But anyway, moving on from that, as this stuff is being transported up into here, we do know it's not lasting very long. So this actually happened last Friday, and the video footage is just now coming out. We touched on it yesterday. Over 200 Russian troops are either been killed or wounded in this event, or more. And it was a train coming through Brilivka in the southern part of the Kherson Oblast. It was hit by HIMARS while on the tracks in the city, and it was destroyed. It was carrying a large amount of equipment, troops, and ammunition, and we actually are now getting the video from this event just now today. So I wanted to go ahead and pull this stuff up for you so you can see just how effective what the Ukrainian artillery fires being brought down onto these targets is really doing to the Russian capability.
Елеватор горить. Ой-ой-ой, ой-ой-ой, ой! Я хуею!
Yeah, man, GTFO. I don't know why you're staring at it. Once again, JP says, just can't imagine seeing trainloads of self-propelled artillery going by my hometown en route to hell on earth. Yeah, it's a pretty crazy feeling to think about that. Even when I was in the Marine Corps and I was overseas, the seeing the means of war, the means and methods of war, and the equipment and the sheer firepower, and the U.S. presence in Syria is not like it's not like it's not like the invasion of Iraq in 2003. It's not this huge presence. You know, when I was there, it wasn't a huge presence. It was a relatively small U.S. footprint in Syria, and the immense amount of firepower and ordnance that was there. And how much hate and discontent we were laying downrange with it is just insane. It's unfathomable to think about. The aircraft sorties alone, every 30 minutes, Al Jaber Air Base in Kuwait, every 30 minutes, Tent City, which is where we were sleeping at the time, before and after you get back from your forward location, you come back to Kuwait, and Tent City is at the end of the tarmac. It's at the end of the airfield. And the first deployment is when the bombing campaigns were really happening. And every 30 minutes, an aircraft was either taking off or landing on the tarmac after completing an 8-hour mission or getting ready to go onto an 8-hour mission. And they would go out and they would leave fully laden jets with as much air-to-ground ordnance and with some minor air-to-air defense ordnance on board. And they would come back and they were empty, completely empty. It was insane to watch and witness. And so this war, the war ongoing in Ukraine, compared to what I've even witnessed, is unfathomable in scale. And the immense amount of usage of equipment and the immense amount of firepower on both sides, the death, destruction, it's another level of horrific. It's another level of just disturbing. It's hard, it's impossible for me to fathom. The war is so huge. There's so much stuff, there's so much going on. It's really the largest war in Europe since the end of World War II. I know that the Russians tried to bring up Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was an internal affair. The breakup of Yugoslavia, it broke up into several independent nations, or tried to, and they didn't get along, and there was a lot of terrible things. This is two industrialized first world nations killing each other. That's a totally different thing than a messy civil war / breakup. And it's just unfathomable. I can't. I take a look at some of these images, and it's very hard to believe. And he says, JP once again goes in and he says, this war, above all others, has really demonstrated the kinetic power of modern weaponry. Eye-popping. Yeah, this war is much more akin to World War I than many people actually realize. World War I, look at some of the similarities. The immense usage of artillery, the immense usage of static trench warfare, those two things alone are very telling. And the reason why it's very telling is you have to understand some of the reasons why World War I devolved into the way it did. World War I became trench warfare because to be above ground was too deadly. The machine gun, the artillery capabilities that had developed by that point, by the beginning of the war in 1914, and much more so later on, 1916, 1917, 1918, trench warfare, Flanders and the Somme and Verdun, were just, the immense amount of killing power meant that war couldn't be fought the same way it had simply a decade before. War had totally changed. It was now a much more deadly and devastating affair, and the best way to conduct war and take the fewest amount of losses was to dig a hole in the ground. We see that once again here. We see where war has gone far past what really was expected. Modern war is usually this high-paced. A lot of people like to use the term blitzkrieg. It's not really used properly. In fact, even the Germans didn't use blitzkrieg when they called it. But it's this fast-paced maneuver warfare. And what we're seeing here is very different. It's very heavy usage of artillery, which is in line with Russian doctrine, Soviet Russian doctrine. And we see heavy usage of trench static defenses, which has worked very well against the oncoming assaulting force, which is the Russians themselves and their tank forces, really put their mechanized capabilities really out of action. They can't maneuver around these defensive lines, and now war has just become too much of a deadly affair, more so than anyone had realized for a modern war. And we really go back into that mindset of we need to dig a hole in the ground until we can figure this out. JL says, hitting a train full of ammo, full of an ammo load needs to have quite a big value because of destroyed train logistical routes. Yeah, it does. And we see partisan activity doing the same thing. We actually reported on some of that up there in the Zaporizhia Oblast. Same thing with this, the hitting of the Antonovsky Bridge. Similar endeavor there, hitting trains, hitting this kind of stuff. It is a logistical nightmare. But it's a logistical nightmare anyway. You got to think how many ammunition depots that Ukraine has destroyed at this point. The amount of ammunition they've destroyed regarding the stockpiles of Russia is negligible. They've destroyed a very, very small fraction of the ammunition Russia has available at its disposal for this war when they destroy these ammunition depots. But what it means is that trucks now have to travel further, which means they can carry less supplies less often. They're burning more fuel to do so. They require more maintenance. And so your troops are getting supplied less often, which means they can fight less often, which means they can't hold the line as easily, which means they can't, you can win a battle with what you're sent out with. These guys can go and take a village, and a brand new Russian unit can go, a company can go and take a small village in Ukraine, but they can't defend themselves against the counterattack because they have to wait an entire day to get resupplied with ammunition. That's what's happening, and destroying those depots means it will take it longer. So now instead of a day, it's a day and a half, and then now it's 2 days, and now it's 2.5, 3 days, or 4 days, or 5 days, whatever. And you can't sustain a war like that. Russian logistics is already under a heavy burden. They didn't have the logistical capabilities when they started. They were only able to logistically support about 2/3 of their invasion force when they started the war. We saw the ramifications when they were commandeering civilian vehicles and shipping them in to make up for that. Now you also have the losses of a lot of their vehicles. You're having the losses of a lot of these logistical hubs and any logistical infrastructure that they have come up with. And the HIMARS and the Mars 2 are really putting some stress onto that right now. Let's jump up here into Kherson. More destroyed ammunition depots. This is coming from the Sergei Klon, who's the advisor to the head of the Kherson Regional Military Administration. And he has said, quote, "The armed forces of Ukraine destroyed 2 Russian ammunition depots in the Kherson region on August 3rd. Now I know that there was a comment regarding it's very frustrating the very slow trickle of information coming into the Kherson Oblast. Because of we know that there's like a counteroffensive ongoing. There's a lot of stuff happening. What we know is that Russian morale is pretty deplorable right now. We've heard a lot of rumors about it. We know that partisan activity is at an all-time high. They conducted 2 different hits, one on a Russian collaborator inside of Kherson, and another one only a couple miles away on a police car. We know that they are really being very vocal and very active. They're killing occupational forces, which obviously takes security from the front lines and has to suppress the local population there. We also know that they are really failing logistically now. They're having to use ferries to cross the Dnipro River. They can't pontoon across it. It's too fast moving, so they have to use ferries, which, once again, when we saw the Ukrainians doing the exact same thing across the Seversky Donetsk up by Lysychansk, between Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, it wasn't very long after they had to start doing that the Battle of Severodonetsk was over, because they couldn't logistically support it. And we also know that they're trying to logistically support across the Dnipro River, not just military traffic, but civilian traffic as well. And when you are that lacking in capability, you can't do both. You have to do one or the other. And I'd be much more focused on my military objectives if I was a military commander than trying to get some civilian cars across the Dnipro River. You still have Novakovka as a crossing point, but it's a lot less capable, and that is also easily struck. So the lack of information, some of it we can get from RIA and Russian state-run news media agencies. They regard them as terror attacks, but they do report on partisan activity as terror attacks, and they report on it very frequently. You can also get a lot of official statements if you know who to follow. If you know who to follow within the Kherson and Mykolaiv Oblasts, you can get some really good official statements very quick and easy from things like a Twitter. Information in a battle space is usually going to be very delayed. You're talking anywhere from 12 to 72 hours usually in delay of information release. And with an ongoing offensive, usually no news is good news. A lack of information out of Kherson usually means that Ukrainian forces are on the move. They're conducting operations. You're going to see a lot more of Russians on the move and getting screwed up by Ukrainian forces pretty bad, because everyone wants to show where the Russians are, because it's an information gold mine for everybody. But you don't want to show where your own guys are, because that puts them at risk. It's operational security. So, but there are ways. We are hearing some things, and hopefully we'll continue to hear some. As we jump up here, we see that once again the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast was actually hit with more Russian shelling. This time, instead of hitting Nikopol, which is what they've usually been hitting from the Enerhodar nuclear facility. We're seeing them actually hit Zelenodolska, which is here on towards the Kherson front. Quote, Russian occupiers shelled the Zelenodolska community in the Dnipropetrovsk region on August 3rd. One woman was killed, one man was injured. Local private houses, agricultural outbuildings, and private autos were damaged. And that's coming from the press service of the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Military Administration. But we end on a high note because here in Odessa, the next shipment is ready to go. According to Dmytro Kuleba, who is he's the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Ukraine, the next shipments of grain are already loaded and the ships are ready to leave the port. They're ready to go. And he actually gave this out on his official Twitter here. Next quote, next ships with Ukrainian grain are loaded and ready to depart if Russia holds to its commitments under the UN-brokered grain initiative. They will reach foreign customers and help tame food prices and avert hunger. Ukraine remains committed to combating global food insecurity, end quote. So, very good news when it comes to that grain crisis ongoing there. But that's actually it for everything inside of Ukraine for the night. There's a lot of stuff that's been happening, a lot of updates, a lot of stuff when it comes to the offensives we're not getting a lot of information about, unfortunately. I know that's what everyone is interested in, the Kherson offensive, the offensives that the Russians are trying to commit against Bakhmut and Soledar. Unfortunately, in very kinetic and fluid situations, the information is not always available, and what information is available is usually very hard to actually go through and say it's happening, when it's happening, where it's happening, or that it's even recent. You have to keep in mind Ukraine has been fighting a war since 2014, so there has been a lot of times where older footage has been passed off as coming from this ongoing war, which isn't always true. So it's very difficult. Just bear with it in a fluid situation. You kind of have to take it as it goes. Even the military screws it up. When the Russians attacked a U.S. outpost in Syria with the Wagner group, we were told a whole T-90 battalion tank, or a whole T-90 tank battalion had crossed the river. It wasn't the case. It was a bunch of Wagner guys. So even we screwed that up, and we were there. So when it comes to this information, you just have to kind of roll with it and just understand that there is going to be delays and that not all information is going to be accurate. And that allows us to roll into the international news. And of course, we start off with Russia. Russia has always has some very entertaining stuff to tell us. And up here in Moscow, we get no different. Finally, somebody has gotten the whole point of sanctions. This is Anatoly Antonov, and he has stated that sanctions imposed by the West are meant to crowd out Russia from global markets. And this is coming from the Russian embassy in the United States. Anatoly Antonov, the sanctions machine initiated by Washington continues to stamp out restrictions against Russian business in an attempt to crowd Russia out of the global markets. You don't say. What is the point of economic sanctions? Oh yeah, that's right, to make sure you can't get money for economic trade so that way you stop doing the really terrible actions you're doing. Like, that's the whole point of an economic sanction. Like, that's what a sanction is making sure you can't do something. Sanctioning Russian goods, sanctioning Russian oil, sanctioning Russian gas, sanctioning Russian gold, sanctioning whatever you're talking about when it comes to the Russian Federation. You know, sanctioning parts, sanctioning whatever. Like, making it so you can't get money to continue a war. Because wars cost a lot of money. And Russia's going to have to foot the bill. Because they have to, because even if they don't, even if Russia, when they lose this war, because they're going to, trust me, they're going to, there's no hope for Russia winning this at this point in the war. Even if they don't end up repaying any kind of reparations to Ukraine, think of all of the tanks that they have lost, and all of the jets, and the helicopters, and all the ammunition they fired, and all the gear that they have lost for each individual soldier, every rifle, every grenade, everything. That is a ton of money. That is an insane amount of money. Even a poorly equipped military costs an insane amount of money. And I mean, think of how many tanks you've seen captured, destroyed, burned out. APCs, IFVs. I mean, it's terrible. Like, the losses are unsustainable, and Russia has to rebuild their military at some point, and they got to foot the bill on that. There's no hope. Like, they would have to return to a communist country to not foot the bill. JL, are there any legal in terms of Geneva Convention kind of weapons that inflicts damage to vehicles but not to humans and are not landmines? Trying to think here. If you're talking about an armored vehicle like a tank or an APC, I don't know of any that doesn't inflict damage to people. My job in the Marine Corps, I was an anti-tank missileman. So my job was to destroy tanks and armored vehicles. The way that you most of the time will do it is you will use like an anti-tank guided missile, which usually has a shape charge in it to punch through the armor, which spews hot liquid copper or whatever on the inside of the vehicle, and it will burn and kill the crew, and also cause the ammunition to explode, which, if there are any survivors, will kill the crew. And the Monroe effect, if they survive all of that, will actually kill the crew as well. There is also kinetic penetrators, which are things like your AFSDS rounds, your sabot rounds, your saboted rounds, which is where they're super high velocity and they literally punch through the vehicle. Depleted uranium will do this too. And then you also have the Challenger 2 tank has a type of round that the United Kingdom goes for that they don't use sabot rounds or depleted uranium. What they do is they actually hit the armor, and the way it hits the armor actually causes it to essentially splinter on the inside, and those shards of metal are what kills the crew. It causes less damage to the vehicle, but it does still kill the crew. Everything else is landmines, which most of the time actually won't kill the crew or destroy the tank. Most of the time that's a mobility kill with a landmine, even an anti-tank mine. And then larger pieces of ordnance, you'd still be talking about, bombs from aircraft, Hellfire missiles, that kind of thing. Is going to be the same. It's going to be catastrophic destruction of the vehicle. I don't know of any type of disabling capabilities. There are ways to disable an armored vehicle and not kill the crew. It's called, most of the time it's called a mobility kill. And that's where you destroy the treads on the tank. I have talked about this a little bit before, using like an AT-4 rocket or my RPG-7. I wouldn't try to actually blow up the tank because it's kind of infeasible with those. Instead, I would aim for the treads. That way it can't move. The turret's still dangerous, but eventually you can just kind of take it out, bypass the tank, and eventually the crew is going to leave the tank and either attempt to repair it in the field, which is unlikely, or they're going to have to just abandon it there in place and try to make their way back to friendly lines and probably get picked up by Ukrainian troops on the way. So that's about the only way I can see it, is getting a mobility kill, using a weapon that won't physically actually destroy the tank, and won't penetrate the armor, and actually just shooting something like the treads or the wheels and disabling it that way, getting a mobility kill. But the turret's still dangerous if you do that, so you have to keep that in mind too. As we jump down here, this is in Rostov-on-Don, which is over here by Crimea. And we have more Russian equipment, of course. Once again, they're pouring massive amounts of equipment into Ukraine. That is an understatement. And then we only see a small fraction of what they're actually pouring in there. It's what happens to be when someone takes a photo or a video. But just look at this. This is coming from Rostov-on-Don. They're staged here and ready to go. This is more Russian equipment on flatbed rail car. So once again, more and more equipment moving into Ukraine. This is going to end up going through either over here into, say, the Donetsk Oblast, or it's going to go down here and into Crimea and up this way. You can really go either way. But as we move over here, and this is into Turkish international, or this is into Turkish waters, the inspection of the very first shipment of grain is underway. It has reached Turkish territorial waters, and now the joint investigation team made up of Turkish, Ukrainian, and Russian officials, inspectors, is now going through and making sure that all the cargo is as it has been declared. And after that has passed, which it already has, as I found out while writing this, it's actually en route to Lebanon. So I actually have a photo of the joint team here. They're inspecting the ship's manifest. They will inspect the cargo of the ship itself. And then, as we can see here, this is all coming from the United Nations, by the way. The MV Razoni was fully loaded and within minutes of sail from Odessa when the war started in February. 5 months later, it was the first vessel inspected and cleared by the Joint Coordination Center under the Black Sea Grain Initiative. It can now proceed to its final destination, which we do know is Lebanon. They officially declare that here in their first post. Yep, headed for Lebanon. So, awesome to see. Awesome to see things are actually starting to work out with that. Is it as much as we would like? No. But something is better than nothing, and considering the situation in Ukraine and the difficulties just to get this, we should take it as a victory for the world. We really should. The WFP, or the World Food Program, which is run by the United Nations, is one of their main arms for humanitarian assistance, where they cover places like Somalia, Ethiopia. The World Food Program estimated that 50% of all of their humanitarian aid grain stocks are actually from Ukraine. So it's a big impact when it comes to humanitarian efforts globally. So huge, huge deal that this is finally starting to work out. You jump over here into the Middle East. We jump down here into Deir ez-Zor province here in Syria. Two PKK members, which is the Kurdish Marxist Party for Syrian Kurdistan. The PKK, two of them were killed by the Islamic State after they shot two of the members in the Al-Sabah province, which is in Busira district of Deir ez-Zor, and their weapons were taken by those militants. The Islamic State is active, very active within this region. They continue to attack Kurdish formations, which are their main opponents within Deir ez-Zor and Al-Hasaka provinces of Syria. And so, right now, they're currently working on trying to kill and kidnap Kurdish forces. You can see some of their weapons having been taken. We jump up here into Armenia, and where Azerbaijan has attacked Armenian positions, and Azerbaijani Bayraktar TB2 hit one of the positions of the Armenian forces near Sardog Heights in the Lachin region of Karabakh. As a result of which 9 soldiers were killed and wounded, and the Azerbaijani armed forces took the Gurkis Heights under their control. So once again, the tensions between Armenia and Azerbaijan are heating up, and they are once again becoming very kinetic of a situation. Let's take a look at some of this here. The Azerbaijani armed forces have launched a counterterrorism operation Retribution with the aim of disarming the separatists at the Karabakh and withdrawing Armenian troops from the country. The reason was the death of an Azerbaijani soldier in the Lachin region, in response to which the UAV attack has followed. Now the Ministry of Defense of Azerbaijan has published new videos of the strike inflicted earlier today. So we can see here some more drone footage of attacks ongoing. They're hitting different logistical convoys, it would seem, and troop convoys. So, once again, tensions are heating up within this region, and that's not the only thing happening within the region. Iran is building up its troop presence here in the northwestern part, in which the case they may become party to this conflict if tensions continue to rise. Not quite sure what they have involved with this, but we do know that more equipment and troops are on the move. So, interesting thing, that is a Zulfikar. That's specifically the Zulfikar 3. I don't know if you noticed what it looks like, but if you weren't keen on the eyes, this thing looks like an Abrams. And the reason why is because Iran purposely built the Zulfikar to look like an Abrams to possibly inflict friendly fire if America ever went to war with Iran. But we got a follow-on question from JL, who stated, about my question, how to disable vehicles but not to hurt people and be legal. I meant something like deployed police earring kind of things, or something chemical that would interact with tires to cause the traffic. Yeah, I mean, there's not really a whole lot of legal ways to disable a vehicle. Pour sugar in the gas tank. That's about it. That's about all I can imagine. Yeah, like contaminant. Like, there's not really any way of like disabling a vehicle that's like legal. Like, you can't really do anything legally, realistically. So, Lipton on our Discord says contamination of the fuel. Yeah, JL, sorry, on the Discord says contamination of the fuel would probably be hard and might be illegal, probably. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, like everything you can do to disable a vehicle is basically illegal. Intentionally disabling someone else's vehicle is pretty much legal in every sense of the way. So just don't do it unless you're intending to do illicit activities, in which case I advise against it. Unless you live in Russia, then it might not be so bad. That's your choice as an independent human being with free will. But if I was a Russian protester, what I would do is I would pour sugar in the gas tank. That would really screw that stuff up. Water would take too much. I would also just not worry about the legality if I was a protester in Russia and trying to overthrow somebody or a government official or something. You could also possibly put like a Molotov cocktail down there and light it and actually set the vehicle on fire. And if you're looking to avoid insurance claims, slash 3 tires, not 4. But anyway, I don't recommend illicit activities. I do not recommend illicit activities. That usually ends very poorly for you. It's usually a mild inconvenience for the other person. It usually ends really badly for you. Here in Kabul, the Islamic State apparently attacked a religious ceremony. A Shia district of the Karday Sikh in Kabul. There was an attack on the Shia ceremony celebrating the 10 days of Muharram. And the details of the incident have yet been specified. Most likely talking about a terrorist attack by the Islamic State, which had previously announced a goal of attacking various religious groups.
فعلا بسیار جنگ شدید جریان داره.
The battle between the Islamic State militants and the Taliban lasted for more than 7 hours. Yeah, not a very short firefight there. Reports of many killed security officials who clashed with the terrorists. The Taliban spokesman said that 4 jihadists were killed in the clash. According to available information, the Islamic State took refuge in one of the buildings where they held a defense. That was quickly ended. That defense in their building was quickly ended with a explosive charge of some kind, which we have here. I have no idea what this man threw into this building, but man, was it effective. So what I'm going to guess and say, because based off of the early part of this video, mute the tab real quick. So this guy right here, he's prepping something. And you can see he puts a gas tank in there. And I'm going to guess and say this is probably a gas can filled with homemade explosive or HME, because it's a big boom. It's a big boom. Also, once again, don't do illegal stuff. It's like, I don't condone you doing I don't condone doing illegal stuff. Like, don't do it. It's not okay. It's a terrible idea. Once again, it's a terrible idea for you. Reportedly, partisans, I guess, in Ukraine are pouring sugar in gas tanks. Yeah, that makes sense. Another thing that I know that the Russians have done themselves is they actually, those that aren't wanting to fight, have actually poked holes in their gas tanks, so that way fuel not only gets contaminated, but it just leaks out and they can't refuel it effectively. So that was something that was getting reported rather early on, actually, in the war, and I'm sure it persists as morale continues to become more and more deplorable. Move over here into China. 3 people were killed during a knife attack, and 6 others were wounded Wednesday, so today, at a kindergarten in southeast China's Jiangxi province. The man wearing a cap and mask stormed a private kindergarten in Anfu County at about 10 a.m. local time. The 48-year-old suspect was identified by his surname Liu in a police statement. No further details of the attack were given. The ages of the victims have not yet been announced. And as we move over here into Taipei, Nancy Pelosi's second day in Taiwan, and her final day in a visit to Taiwan, has officially wrapped up. The Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives met up with the Vice Speaker of a local parliament and the head of the administration of Taiwan. Pelosi reiterated that the U.S. will not relinquish its commitment to Taiwan. The head of the administration of the island, Tsai Ing-wen, in turn noted that Taiwan will not back down in the face of military threats and will strengthen its defense capabilities. Once again, Taiwan is essentially like Iwo Jima multiplied by about 1,000. China has imposed a series of sanctions against Taiwan, suspended the export of sand, imports of citrus fruits, and several types of fish. The Chinese Foreign Ministry called China's reunification with Taiwan a historical inevitability. Yeah, good luck with that, guys. It may take 2 million men, and it may fail. Oh, then we can take a look here at them meeting there together. So, nice to see. Yeah, Taiwan is the fact that, yeah, Taiwan is a mess geopolitically, and it really should deserve its independence properly. As we jump down here into Australia, Australia, as a result of the rising tensions within this region, Australia has announced a combat readiness test. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, announced the start of a military readiness test. The last time a review of Australian troops was held in 2012. Prime Minister explained that the verification is needed to protect the nation and prevent conflicts. Mr. Albanese said that the combat readiness of troops will be tested against the backdrop of a deteriorating security situation. This review will prepare Australia to respond effectively to the changing regional and global strategic environment and ensure that its defense capabilities and military structure are aligned, accessible, and maximize return on investment, according to the Prime Minister. You can check that out at sbs.com.au. Jump over here into Africa. We're here in Burkina Faso. 37 citizens were killed after a Burkina Faso Air Force strike. Dozens of civilians were killed by the country's Air Force. The tragedy occurred on August the 1st in the border province of Kompienga with Togo. The military claims that the group of jihadists became the target of the government aircraft, but an unarmed number of civilians fell under the strike along with militants. According to eyewitness accounts, 37 women and children were killed in the explosion. The Ministry of Defense of Burkina Faso acknowledged the fact of the strike on civilians, noting that the leadership of the department has initiated an investigation into the incident. And we actually have that official announcement right here for you. Move over here into the United States, where up here in Napanee, Indiana, just north or just near the intersection of State Road 19 and 119, the U.S. House of Representatives, 2nd District of Indiana, Representative Jackie Walorski was killed along with 3 others. Two individuals in her team were also in the SUV with her. The car accident occurred just north of Napanee here in Elkhart County when a car crossed the median caused a head-on collision, which killed everyone involved, including the driver of the other car. There were absolutely no survivors of the accident. The flags of the Capitol will be lowered to half-mast on the order of the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, as members of Congress have already begun to give their condolences, and President Biden has also ordered the flags of the White House be flown at half-mast as well. And you can get more on that coming from the Elkhart Truth. And now we start getting into some more uplifting things and interesting, cool things to try and end the night on a good note. And the first thing we have is actually coming from Yale University. Scientists have partially revived pig organs an hour after death. Why is this important? Well, there's really a very short time frame to revive something and to revive people. And pigs are the closest semi-moral thing we can test to in comparison. Pigs are very anatomically similar internally to people, so it's a very interesting test. Researchers have restored circulation and cellular activity in the vital organs of pigs, such as the heart and brain, 1 hour after the animals died. The research challenges the idea of that cardiac death, which occurs when blood circulation and oxygenation stops, is irreversible and raises ethical questions about the definition of death itself. In the work, researchers connected pigs that had been dead for 1 hour to a system called the Organ X that pumped a blood substitute throughout the animal's body. The solution slowed the decomposition of the bodies and quickly restored some organ function, such as heart contraction and the activity in the liver and kidney. Although Organ X helped to preserve the integrity of some brain tissue, researchers did not observe any coordinated brain activity that would indicate the animal had regained any consciousness or sentience. If you want to learn more about that, you can go and check it out at nature.com, who has a full article on it. And finally, to wrap up the night, we actually jump back over here into the Middle East, where we go over here to Jerusalem. Archaeologists have excavated beside Jerusalem's western wall and have unearthed thousands of years of the city's history, including an ornate 2,000-year-old villa with a private mikveh or ritual bath. Permission was given to a development company in 2017 to build 2 elevators for better disabled access to make the 85-foot or 26-meter descent beside the existing steps at the edge of the old city's Jewish quarter. The archaeologists began excavating the tiny area in 2019. One of the interesting finds on the elevator site are the terracotta pipes installed during the Ottoman period in Jerusalem, probably in the 19th century. Water pipes are still intact, and they continue the line of an aqueduct built during the late Second Temple period. So pretty cool. Pretty cool that they're all the stuff that they're finding. Jerusalem has a very long and storied history. Pretty much everybody in the Middle East has controlled Jerusalem at some point. It's a holy land for so many people, and it's a huge, important place for a lot of human history. So a lot of history to be uncovered there, a lot of control over Jerusalem by a lot of different factions over the years, and it's pretty cool that they're discovering some really cool stuff. But if you want to check out more in depth on that, you can check it out at lifescience.com, which has an entire article on it. But that actually wraps up the entirety of the day's news. That's everything ongoing in the world from at least our sources regarding the news today. A lot of stuff ongoing, a lot of pretty terrible stuff, a lot of interesting stuff, a lot of geopolitical stuff. But there is a lot of good news when it comes to what we can do to help. A lot of this stuff, generally speaking, isn't very uplifting. We try and find uplifting stuff every night to try and, offset that a little bit. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of it's kind of dark and depressing, and that's the stuff that makes the news. Death, famine, pestilence, drought, the bubonic plague, that pretty much makes the news. But we can help because you guys have built an awesome community here. We're never doing super chats on this channel. We're never pushing any kind of merchandising. 100% of everything that we do is going towards charity, including when we get large enough, a charity fundraiser on every single stream directly, so you can donate directly to that fundraiser whenever we're live. And so hopefully you guys will continue to support us in that endeavor. Please check out the video description below. There's a ton of different links down there. If you have more, please get onto our Discord. The link's also there in the description. And let a staff member know. Let them know, shoot them a link, and shoot them a short summary of what that organization is. We'll try and go and get that vetted. 80% or more of your donations that these organizations and fundraisers receive go directly to assisting the people in need. So please go and check them out. We've tried to do our very best to vet all of these and make sure that they're safe for you, and also that they're doing the most amount of good possible. So if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, give us a like and subscribe. Let your friends know about us. The more people that are here, the more good we can do overall, and the more of an impact this community will have on good things throughout the world, and we can give directly back to the news that we talk about here every single night. And so with that, I hope that you guys have a wonderful Thursday. I hope that you guys enjoy the rest of your night or the rest of your morning, depending on where you're at in the world. I hope that you guys remain safe, that your family and your friends remain safe, and I appreciate you guys joining us once again here on the New News for our 100th stream. It's an awesome achievement, and it's awesome to have you guys alongside us, supporting us to get us to this point. So thank you very much. Please give a big hand to the staff. They're the ones that really make this and put this thing together for us. They're the ones that I really just put points in a map and talk about it for an hour. They are the ones that actually do all the research. They verify everything. They're the ones that are going through and getting things translated, so they're doing an amazing job. So give them props, and hopefully you guys will be back to join us once again tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central, for yet another 24 hours of news and review. Other than that, have a fantastic night, everybody, and hopefully once again we'll see you tomorrow. My name is Paul from the New News, and have a fantastic rest of your night.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волновахи, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас слать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлепуємо. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волновахи, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Визволять прийшов, братішка, ну привіт. Confederate is gone. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут зустрічаємо з вагоном. І стріляє довольно вахи, і чудно кличе дітям нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут зустрічаємо з вагоном. І стріляє довольно вахи, чудно кличе дітям нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут зустрічаємо